My grandfather, a man known for his calm demeanor, didn't raise his voice, not even a fraction, when he unveiled the secret that the others at the Thanksgiving table desperately hoped would remain hidden from me forever. With deliberate movements, he set down his fork, the clatter echoing in the sudden hush, and opened his laptop. His gaze, steady and knowing, fixed on my mother before he asked, "Elaine, did you get the email about Ellen's trust fund?" The next 10 seconds were a chaotic symphony of clinking silverware and gasps, each sound amplified by the sudden tension. My mother froze, her eyes darting around the table like a cornered animal. My sister, Marissa, stared intently at her plate, her face an unreadable mask. A strange sensation washed over me, as if the floor beneath me had tilted, throwing my world off its axis. I didn't even know Iraq's trust fund. But what my grandfather showed me next wasn't just a revelation at dinner. It was a seismic event that reshaped the entire narrative of my life. My name is Ellen Hale, and for most of my years, I believed that being the quiet one was the path of least resistance, the key to survival. When you grow up in a house where your sister's triumphs are showcased like prized trophies, and your own aspirations are relegated to background noise, you learn to shrink, to make yourself smaller. You learn to speak in hushed tones, to occupy less space, to navigate life by not demanding too much, by minimizing your footprint. My mother used to utter the phrase, "Don't make things complicated, Ellen," with the same gentle cadence other parents used when saying goodnight. And for years, I internalized her words, believing them to be true. That's why, sitting at my grandfather's Thanksgiving table, the words trust fund hit me like a physical blow, as if someone had reached back into my childhood and shattered every carefully constructed memory into a million jagged pieces. A trust fund, not as mine? It seemed utterly absurd, a cruel joke. I grew up meticulously counting every dollar, working grueling weekend shifts at the local grocery store, meticulously repairing thrift store sweaters, and constantly asking my mom if we had anything saved for college, only to be met with the same response, a mantra of financial constraint. "We're doing our best, Ellen." Money is tight. But the reality was, money was never actually tight, not for everyone anyway. Marissa, my older sister, received a constant stream of opportunities and luxuries. Dance lessons, prestigious summer programs, a shiny new car on her 17th birthday. Back then, it had somehow made sense, fitting neatly into the established family dynamic. She was the star, the one everyone expected to shine, while I was content to fade into the background. I had convinced myself it was fine, that I simply didn't need as much. Grandpa Arthur was the one exception, the steady beacon of light in my often overlooked existence. He never treated me like an afterthought. He remembered my favorite books, always asked about my job at the college, and even showed up to my graduation, despite my parents citing heavy traffic as a reason to skip the event. But even he had never uttered a single word about a trust fund, not even a hint. So when he posed that question across the dinner table, I wasn't just confused. I was deeply, profoundly embarrassed. It was the kind of embarrassment that burrows deep beneath the skin, settling behind your ribs, and whispering that maybe you're the only one at the table who doesn't understand the joke, the punchline of which is your own ignorance. My mother's reaction did nothing to alleviate my discomfort. She avoided my gaze, instead directing a sharp, warning glare at Grandpa, as if silently pleading with him to shut the laptop before I could see anything else. My father, oblivious or perhaps deliberately so, continued to meticulously carve his turkey, even though no one was actually eating. And my sister lifted her glass to her lips but didn't take a sip, her movements oddly stilted, like an actress caught in the wrong scene. Every tiny gesture felt rehearsed, perfectly coordinated, as if they were all privy to a secret I wasn't. And perhaps they were, because the truth, cold and undeniable, began to dawn on me even before the laptop screen fully swiveled in my direction. Someone in that room had been making critical decisions about my finances, my opportunities, my future. Someone had been rewriting the narrative of my life while I was busy trying to be the quiet, compliant one, the one who didn't rock the boat. And if my suspicions were correct, then this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. It was a decade of carefully constructed silence built upon a foundation of deliberate lies. Grandpa didn't rush, his fingers moving with a slow, deliberate grace as he turned the laptop toward me. It was as if he were offering everyone at the table a final chance to intervene, to stop him if they dared. But no one did. The screen tilted, and the soft, cool glow illuminated the plates, the flickering candles, and my mother's increasingly strained jawline. I leaned forward, my heart pounding against my ribs with such force that I could hear its frantic rhythm in my ears. Rows of emails came into focus, the subject lines repeating the same words, over and over again. Annual trust statement, beneficiary notice, contact confirmation. 10 years of messages, 10 years of updates, 10 years of information that should have been directed to me, but had been systematically intercepted. For a fleeting moment, I desperately clung to the hope that there might be another explanation, some benign oversight that could absolve my mother of any wrongdoing. Maybe the bank had the wrong address on file. Maybe there was another Ellen Hale with a similar story. Maybe this was just some bizarre administrative mix-up, a clerical error of epic proportions. My mind frantically grasped at any straw that would allow me to believe my mother when she whispered, "That can't be right," as if she were the one who had been blindsided, the innocent victim of circumstance. But then I clicked on the sender address, and the hope evaporated, leaving only a bitter residue of betrayal. The contact email listed wasn't mine. It never had been. It was a variation of my mother's, an address she used for financial accounts, one I recognized from old household bills she had handled alone. My stomach dropped, plummeting into an abyss of disbelief and confusion. Why would these emails be going to your email?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Not an accusation, but a desperate plea for understanding as the foundations of my world crumbled around me. My mother didn't even blink, her expression carefully neutral. "I don't know, Ellen. Banks make mistakes all the time." But Grandpa didn't waver, his gaze fixed on her with unwavering intensity. "They don't make this kind of mistake, Elaine," he said quietly, his voice laced with a hint of steel. A flush of guilt crept up my mother's neck, staining her skin crimson. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, as if preparing to defend her, but no words came out. Marissa looked back and forth between them, her face etched with confusion, perhaps fear, or maybe simply worry that whatever this was, it might somehow impact her own privileged existence. I opened the earliest email, dated 10 years prior. I remembered that year vividly. It was the year I had timidly asked my parents if we had anything set aside for my tuition, because my scholarship alone wasn't enough to cover all the expenses. Mom had replied, with that familiar tone of strained patience, "We're doing our best, Ellen, but money is tight, sweetheart." Except it wasn't tight. Not for the person these emails were intended for. Not for Tense Miss. I scrolled through the next year and the next, each email a painful reminder of a moment in my life when I had desperately needed help and had been told to manage on my own, to make do with less. The nights I had skipped meals to save money. The mornings I had walked to class in the pouring rain because my car had broken down and repairing it wasn't a priority. The summers I had worked double shifts at the grocery store, while Marissa attended prestigious dance camps in other cities. Every memory sharpened against the cold, harsh glow of the laptop screen, each sacrifice a testament to the lie I had been living. Grandpa finally spoke again, his voice steady and unwavering. "Ellen, these are yours. They always were, and someone made sure you never saw them." The table seemed to shrink, the air growing thick and heavy with unspoken accusations. I could feel my mother's stare drilling into me, a potent mixture of warning and barely concealed panic. I closed the laptop gently, not to end the moment, but to contain the rising fury that threatened to consume me. Because now I knew, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that this wasn't a mere oversight, a simple error in judgment. Someone had deliberately rewritten my life, casting me in a role of perpetual scarcity and dependence. I didn't reopen the laptop right away. I just sat there, my hands resting on the closed lid, feeling the heat of the screen seep into my palms, a tangible representation of the anger simmering within me. 10 years of statements, 10 years of silence, 10 years of being told to be patient, be practical, don't expect too much. And all along, the help I had so desperately needed had already existed, under my name, hidden in plain sight. My chest tightened as memories flooded back in sharp, humiliating flashes. The night freshman year when my card was declined at the bookstore, and I had pretended I had forgotten to transfer money, the desperate heat of shame burning my cheeks. The winter break I had worked overtime to afford rent, while Marissa posted envy-inducing pictures from a week-long dance intensive funded by my parents. The afternoons I had cried quietly in the bathroom stall at work, because I didn't know how I was going to pay for another set of textbooks. And every time I had cautiously asked Mom if we had anything saved, She would smile that practiced, pitying smile and say, "Life's expensive, Ellen. We just have to make do." No, she had made sure Fa made do, while secretly hoarding the resources that were rightfully mine. Across the table, Mom finally straightened her back, attempting to regain control of the situation. "We're not jumping to conclusions," she said, her voice strained, as if this entire revelation were some emotional outburst I was orchestrating. "Ellen doesn't understand how these things work. Finances are complicated." The words stung more than they should have. I had heard that condescending, dismissive tone my entire life, the way someone speaks to a child who keeps wandering where they don't belong, a subtle but persistent reminder of my perceived inadequacy. But Grandpa wasn't having it. "Elaine," he said slowly, his voice laced with a dangerous calm, "explain why Ellen's address was replaced with yours." Her eyes flicked toward my father, quick and sharp, as if signaling him to intervene, to provide a convenient excuse. He shifted in his chair but didn't speak, leaving her to fend for herself. She tried again, her voice trembling slightly. "I managed the household paperwork. If something needed updating, I probably handled it by mistake." A mistake. For 10 years, year after year, statement after statement, every single email deliberately rerouted to her inbox. Someone might believe that, but not me. Not anymore. I stood up, pushing my chair back a few inches. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh, grating sound that sliced through the suffocating silence. "If it was a mistake," I said quietly, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion, "then why was I the only one in this family who didn't know I had a trust fund? Why did I struggle, while Marissa—" "Don't drag your sister into this," Mom snapped, her voice breaking for the first time, revealing the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. Marissa shrank into herself, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and discomfort. I kept my voice even, fighting to maintain control. "I'm not dragging her into anything. I'm just asking why someone made sure I never knew what was mine." For the first time all evening, my mother had no quick answer, no carefully rehearsed excuse to offer. Her mouth opened, then closed, her fingers curling around her napkin so tightly that the fabric wrinkled and tore. Grandpa leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Ellen, you deserve the truth, and you deserve control of your own finances." Control, a word I had never been offered before, a concept that seemed both foreign and incredibly appealing. I exhaled slowly, deliberately, trying to regulate my racing heart. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't crying, but inside, something shifted, something solidified, something sharp and certain. I wasn't just the quiet one anymore, the one who passively accepted her fate. This time, I wasn't going to look away. I was going to confront the truth head-on, no matter how painful it might be. Grandpa was the one who finally broke the silence. He pushed his chair back, stood slowly, his joints stiff from age, but his presence towering, a silent declaration of his unwavering support. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on each of us as if taking inventory of who he could still trust. Then, with the same calm that had always made everyone uneasy, he said, "We're not finishing dinner until we understand what happened here." My mother stiffened, her eyes flashing with defiance. My father shifted uncomfortably, his face pale and drawn. Marissa swallowed hard, her anxiety palpable. Grandpa gestured toward the living room, his movements deliberate and unwavering. "All of us, come on." We moved as a group, a tense migration from the warmth of the dining room to the cold formality of his study. The lights were warmer in there, softer, but the air felt colder, charged with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Something about walking into a room filled with framed certificates, leather-bound books, and the old family crest hanging proudly on the wall made it impossible to pretend that things were simple or unclear, that this was just a minor misunderstanding. This room didn't tolerate excuses. It demanded honesty. Grandpa set the laptop on his desk, the cool metal surface gleaming under the lamplight. "Sit," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. No one disobeyed. I stood behind the chair he had pulled out for me, my hands gripping the back, grounding myself in the face of the emotional storm raging within me. Mom sat beside Dad, her posture rigid, her eyes darting around the room, assessing the situation, preparing to argue. Marissa hovered near the doorway, as if hoping she could slip out unnoticed, escape the uncomfortable truth that was about to be laid bare. Grandpa clicked through the email records, his movements precise and deliberate. The blue-white glow casts long shadows on the walls here, he said, his voice a low rumble. He opened an email dated 10 years back, the year I turned 17, the year my life had subtly but irrevocably changed. This is when the contact information was changed. The screen revealed the old email address crossed out, replaced by another, my mother's. A deliberate edit, time-stamped, logged, documented. Mom's breath hitched, a small, involuntary gasp. That could be anything, she said quickly, her voice strained. Banks update things automatically. They send those emails all the time. They don't, Grandpa cut in, his voice sharp and unwavering. Not without the account holder or guardian requesting it. I looked at my father, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Did you request it? He shook his head, his gaze averted, unable to meet my eyes. No. So who did? I asked quietly. Already knowing the answer, no one answered. Grandpa clicked again, opening the confirmation email that had followed the update. The digital breadcrumb trail that led directly to my mother's deception. A message thanking the user for verifying the new contact information, clear and unambiguous. It wasn't vague or unclear. It was tied to an IP address from our home in Seattle, a digital fingerprint that placed my mother squarely at the scene of the crime. My mother's voice cracked, the carefully constructed facade finally crumbling under the weight of the evidence. I was just trying to keep things organized, she stammered, her eyes pleading. I stared at her, the woman who had taught me to say thank you for every small kindness, who had always insisted that life was easier if I didn't expect too much, the woman I had trusted implicitly. Organized? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. Mom, you left me working double shifts while money in my name sat untouched. She recoiled as if I had slapped her, her eyes widening with a mixture of shock and hurt. You were too young to understand responsibility. I didn't want you relying on money you didn't earn. I let out a small, humorless laugh, the sound echoing in the tense silence of the room. But Marissa could? Marissa could understand responsibility? Marissa flinched, her face paling. I didn't know it was yours, Ellen. I swear. Mom said don't. Mom snapped at her, her voice sharp and desperate. Don't say another word. But the damage was done. The truth was out in the open, exposed for all to see. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Elaine, you kept a financial asset from its owner. That's not organization, that's control. My mother's voice sharpened, her defenses rising once again. I did what I had to do for the family, for stability. Ellen never needed much, and Marissa needed everything I asked. Is that it? Grandpa pressed, his gaze unwavering. She pressed her lips together, refusing to elaborate. Dad finally spoke, his voice low and heavy with regret. Elaine, we should have told her. We should have. My mother's head snapped toward him, her eyes blazing with anger. Richard, not now! But Grandpa didn't let her deflect. You lied, he said, his voice unwavering. To me, to Ellen, for a decade. My mother's jaw trembled, the carefully constructed mask of composure finally cracking. Arthur, please, you don't understand. I understand enough, Grandpa replied, his voice firm and resolute. He clicked on another email, his movements precise and unwavering. This one was a trust fund notification from 3 years ago, the year I was juggling rent, classes, and a grueling campus job just to afford basic groceries. I remembered crying in the privacy of my tiny apartment, feeling like I had failed at adulthood before I had even begun. The email subject mocked me now, a cruel reminder of what could have been. Annual allocation update. Money that could have changed everything, money I was never allowed to know existed. Mom, I said softly, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Why? She closed her eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a lonely path down her cheek, a singular, fragile expression of remorse. But her voice was still defensive, clinging to the tattered remains of her justifications. Because you wouldn't have made good decisions. You were always so sensitive, so easily overwhelmed. I needed to protect you from wasting it. My breath caught in my throat, a wave of nausea washing over me. Protect me? Yes, she insisted, her voice gaining strength, clinging to her narrative. And if you'd known about the trust, you would have gone off on your own too fast. You would have left us. The truth settled heavy between us, a suffocating weight of unspoken fears and resentments. She didn't hide the money because I was irresponsible. She hid it because she was afraid I'd grow up without her permission, that I would break free from her control. That wasn't your decision to make, I whispered, the words laced with a raw, visceral pain. My mother shook her head, refusing to acknowledge the truth, even as it stood before her, undeniable and stark. Everything I did was for this family. Grandpa's voice tightened, his eyes narrowing. Then why did you only do it to Ellen? Why didn't you redirect Marissa's trust fund emails? The question punched a hole straight through every excuse she had painstakingly constructed. She had no answer, no plausible explanation for her blatant favoritism. The room was silent, except for Grandpa's steady breathing, the sound amplified in the suffocating tension. Then he turned to me, his gaze filled with compassion. Ellen, you should have access to everything now. Full control. If you want, I can call the bank representative tonight. I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. Yes, I want that. I want control. Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. You can't just... I can, Grandpa said firmly, cutting her off. And I will. She looked at me, her voice cracking with desperation. Ellen, please, we can handle this privately. No, I said, my voice unwavering. For once, this doesn't get handled in the dark. For once, I get to make my own decisions. My mother stood abruptly, her knees wobbling, her face pale and drawn. She reached out to the desk for support, her fingers gripping the edge tightly. You don't understand what this means. If you take control, everything we built... I kept my voice quiet, steady, refusing to be drawn into her drama. Mom, you didn't build it. You borrowed it from me. The words struck deeper than shouting ever could, a precise and devastating blow that shattered the illusion of control she had so carefully maintained. She sank back into her chair, defeated. Grandpa placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his touch a silent source of strength. You're doing the right thing, he said, his voice filled with conviction. For the first time, I felt it too. Not triumph, not revenge, just clarity. A truth that finally belonged to me, a sense of agency I had been denied for far too long. I looked at the laptop, at the decade of stolen decisions laid bare on the screen, and I knew this was the moment my life split into before and after. A definitive line drawn in the sand. Whatever came next, I wasn't going back to being the quiet, compliant girl who passively accepted her fate. I was taking control, and I was never looking back. The bank representative called back within the hour, confirming the transfer of all access and notifications to me. Hearing my own name, my actual email address listed as the rightful contact, felt strangely unreal, like stepping into a life I should have lived years ago, a life that had been deliberately withheld from me. Grandpa squeezed my hand, proud but quiet, letting the moment be mine. My mother stayed seated, shoulders curled inward, not arguing anymore, her energy spent. My father finally met my eyes, his gaze filled with guilt and a glimmer of something that had been rigid for years, a flicker of understanding. Marissa whispered a small apology as she passed me on her way out, her voice barely audible. Later, in the calm after everyone had left, I sat alone in Grandpa's study, scrolling through the newly restored notifications. 10 years of what-ifs, 10 years of choices stolen, 10 years of a life unlived. But now, finally, I had control. Control of the fund, control of my future, control of the story they had tried to write without me. I walked out of Grandpa's house with nothing but a coat and a decade's worth of clarity. For the first time, my future belonged to me. Not the people who feared I'd claim it, not the ones who sought to control my destiny. If this story resonates with you, share your experience below and subscribe for the next chapter.